So this is a long time coming. Trust in you, emergency services center for Exeter Township. Not only does it include the fire company, but it's going to house our emergency medical services also. So there has been a lot of work done on this already, but we're really still at the beginning. So what you see here is one view of a definition of what the station is going to look like. So that's what we're going to do to take the idea. We're going to have a presentation on what the process has been to date. Keep everybody informed. We will explain the need for the new facility. And we will look at an overview of all the plans, rendering. And I'm sure no one's really interested in this, but we'll be talking about what. And then we'll have some breakdown sessions. And what we mean by that, if you are interested in some more detail about the process, the need for the building, or the building construction, we'll have our experts in the back at different tables, and you can visit with them and get further detail. After we're done with the breakout session, maybe another 10 to 15 minutes or so, maybe a little more, we'll come back and we will answer questions. So we have a coordinator with a microphone, so you can come up, just line up, and ask your questions, and we'll do our best to respond to those questions tonight. If you ask, it's a question that if we want to keep this time extension, we'll also that you don't ask question after question after question, or if you have a speak or anything like that. We want to make sure that everybody here who wants to speak has an opportunity to do so. So some of you know me. My name's Bill Vines. I'm the relatively new township manager. Some of you may know that I spent 42 years as a police officer and police chief for various municipalities, including the city of Reddit, the city of Lancaster. And when you talk about me, this fire department universe, this builds. You may or may not know, police departments and fire departments kind of have a rival, right? When I was with the city of Reading, we used to have a hockey game every year with the policemen against the fire department. Sad to say the fire department won most of those, but we did okay. We also really don't like fire departments to get more than the police department in terms of stations and equipment and things like that. So as a former police chief, looking at the needs of the fire department, I could tell you that why will they decide that the fire department's duty on the building? For sure. So let me tell you a little about the team that we have. Building an emergency services center, not like building an office building or a retail building, right? There's a lot involved in it. So we needed expertise in order to make sure this was done correctly. So one of the first things we did is look for a construction management company that would represent Exeter Township and look out for our best interests throughout the entire process and guide us through all the steps that have to be taken. So we hired Oil Construction Management. and engaging with municipalities that have employed them in the past and present for some of their public safety projects. They got excellent reviews, and we're very, very pleased to get them on board at the outset to help us do this. We also formed a committee to help guide us through the process. The committee included fire department personnel, city staff, elected supervisors, and we have had a pretty good cross section. And most of the people on the committee also live in Exeter Township, so they're stakeholders also. So the first thing we did after hiring Boyle Construction and the committee is we needed an architect. So with Boyle's assistance, we put out a request for proposal for an architect, and we got 14 proposals, 5 of which we deemed were the most fitting for us, and we did interview. Part of their team, and the selected architect was Mann's Woodland Studio, and Rob Mann's is here tonight. We're doing a lot of work with Rob's team, and that includes DECD engineering for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and Providence Engineering for structural construction. And then also we put out requests for proposals for plate prep and civil engineering. We've got 5 proposals there, and 7 on permit rolling and movement incorporated. And they have a representative, Dennis. Dennis is here tonight. And also a geotechnical firm. Don't think too much about what a geotechnical firm does, but we also got proposals for them. As I mentioned before, throughout the early part of this process, Exeter Township staff and the fire department staff and board of services, board of supervisors at the room. So our project goal, we want to build the best emergency service center that we can. We want to create a healthy environment for the staff, the volunteers that serve our community. We want to improving volunteer retention and fire people more about that a little bit. But everybody knows, like across Park County and across the Commonwealth, a lot of departments are having difficulties getting enough volunteers to even staff and respond to calls. It's been a real problem. Some of the fire departments have actually gone out of business for the lack of volunteers. Very fortunate in Exeter that it's not have that problem at all. Also want to provide a facility that is environmentally and welcoming for all. Improve training opportunities and to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars as we go through this project. At this time, I think we want to talk more about the need for the building. I'd rather do that than on fire too. Thank you, Bill. Chris Jordan, Fire Chief, Exeter Township Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. First of all, before we begin, I want to give a shout out to our crews today. We had a working fire this afternoon in the center of the township, and our crews were there for over 3 hours. I think Brian is still just finishing cleaning up now. So kudos to those guys. They did a great job this afternoon, and they did a bang-up job. So what I was asked to do this evening is I'm going to talk to you about what the Exeter Township Volunteer Fire Department is, what we do, and also our needs. So the need for an emergency services center. Obviously, as Bill mentioned, health and safety, volunteer staffing, response times, and enhanced training opportunities are all major contributors to the need. One of the biggest needs from this uh, is that we do not own either of our facilities currently. So we currently are in the Rifkin station and in the Stonersville station. We do not own either of those facilities. They're owned by the social quarters, and we have lease agreements with them. The lease agreements are not a money lease. It's more of a contractual lease, just that we engage with them so we can still utilize the facility. So a little bit about the Exeter Township Volunteer Fire Department. For the residents out there, many of you know us as Rifkin Fire Company and Stonersville Fire Company. Well, in 2009, those organizations merged to form the Exeter Township Volunteer Fire Department. The Exeter Township Volunteer Fire Department is completely separate from both social quarters. And as I stated, the social quarters own facilities. Exeter Township Volunteer Fire Department covers Exeter Township and St. Lawrence Borough. It's about 27 square miles of coverage area, 27,000 residents. And currently we have 2 stations in the township. We average over about 1,500 calls per year. We just had a call while we were getting ready for the meeting. And we have over 100 active members, volunteers. We do have career staff, fire police, and also support members. The one thing I do want to say is that we're currently in the Rifkin and Stonersville stations, and the new emergency services center will be centrally located. Once the new emergency services center opens, we will vacate both facilities with our frontline apparatus and our staff. So the facilities will not be in use as fire stations anymore. It will be in a centrally located facility, and everything can fit under one roof. So the Rifkin station. So the Rifkin Fire Company was established in 1913. The station as it sits now was built in the 1960s. And it was renovated in 1996. So the portion you see over here was the original building back in the early 1900s. And this building here was renovated in 1996. Many of you don't know, but in 1994, the Exeter Township supervisors already approved a 3rd fire station to be built on the existing site that we're talking about now. That would have been the 3rd fire station. Once they established that they did not want to go that route, it was established that we would renovate the Rifkin station and add on new bays and add on a bay for a tower ladder. The problem with this facility is it's obviously attached to the social quarters, which is right here. It's built into a hillside, so building access is only from 2 sides. The aprons out the front, the apparatus barely fits onto the aprons. Also, to exit onto the residential streets of Rifkin, if you've driven through them, were built for 1920s and 1930s apparatus. It was not built for the apparatus we have today. The on-site parking is extremely limited. There's a parking garage down below, and the apparatus bins are undersized. The bunk rooms are on the 2nd floor. The bunkering facility is completely away from the bathroom facilities. So if you need to wake up in the middle of the night and use the restroom, you need to come down the stairs, go across the engine room, and go to the bathroom facility. There's no training or meeting space. One of the hard decisions we made a few years ago was to eliminate our training room at this facility in order to hold our staffing program, which is vitally important to our success. And also, currently, there's no room for expansion on this site. We've used everything on this site. We've looked at expanding upwards. However, that's not viable. If you move on to our Stonersville facility, the Stonersville facility was built in 1940. For those of you that don't know, the Stonersville, I'm going to get this wrong, but anyway, they were created in the early 1940s as an air raid agency. And it was coming out of the World War II. That's how it was established. This building has been renovated a few times. Same situation. The social quarters is to the left and the apparatus area is to the right. We have lack of storage space here for firefighter equipment. Also, the building is very outdated and does not meet the current needs. For those of you that have been in that facility, we've been holding off on updating the restrooms. It's not very conducive to any type of staffing at this time. The training room only accommodates about 20 to 25 personnel. When we have meetings, which we just had a meeting last night, we had a training session, and we had people outside of the room waiting to get in. They couldn't even fit in the room. The bunk room shares a wall with the social quarters. I've actually made the decision since I took over as fire chief to actually close that bunk room. The smoke odor from the social quarters and also the lack of sleep they can get from the social quarters having events, it's just not acceptable, and I'm not willing to put our members at jeopardy by staying in that bunker. Both stations have no decontamination area. And as stated, both stations are connected to the social quarters, and the doors going from the social quarters to the engine room area is not secure. It's few and far between, but we have had incidents where patrons from the social quarters have come over to the engine room. We actually had an incident where one of the patrons made it all the way up to the bunk room, and that was not a great situation for our members to be put in. So some other reasons for the new facility. So Exeter obviously has grown over the last 20 to 30 years. When it was determined to not build a third station, but renovate right. We've added Exeter Commons. We've added developments such as Pathfinder Valley, Exeter Golf Course Estates. Those are all centrally located within the township. This facility will help reduce response time to over 50% of the populated area in the township. It also is very important for life safety of our residents and also our first responders. You know, if you read about the cancer-causing toxins that firefighters are faced with every day, we have no area to keep our gear clean. The area where we do have gear washers are commingled with our washers and dryers that we use for normal clothing. And also our gear is kept in the engine room area, which is not NFPA compliant right now. And the members are constantly breathing in those toxins from the gear that's stored in the engine room. The expanded and updated facilities. You know, right now we have limited bathroom areas that are right in station. We cannot add any more staffing due to our space constraints. We've been very fortunate. I actually have a meeting tomorrow with one of our federal representatives where we've been very fortunate where we bucked the trend of volunteerism. Since June, we've added 15 new members, which we're very fortunate. We're very proud of that. But we have no space for these members. They can't take gear racks. They don't know where to store their gear, which prohibits them from coming back to the fire station. Also, the meeting and training room space. We have meetings the first Tuesday of every month. We have numerous training exercises, and people don't come anymore because they have to be shushed away and stay over in the kitchen area at Stoneville before they're going in our meeting room. And we are losing members due to our facility constraints. We don't have separate sleeping quarters for women. We don't have separate sleeping quarters to separate men and women. It's not a great situation, and it causes members to not come around. And now we're going to turn the program over to Chris, correct? It's Rob? Rob, you're up. And I just want to say, I know we're going through this, but at the breakout session, if anyone has specific questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, well, this is just kind of a general area of Gibraltar Road, DeMoss Road, and kind of where the proposed site is. And we'll get into that in a little bit greater detail. Jeff. Sorry, I'm just going to get there. My name's Rob Mans, one of the principal architects of MW Studios, and with me I have Nate McNeil, who's one of our project architects, and Mike Murray, who will be joining us later in the back. A lot of times architects will stand up and talk about how awesome the building is and the bricks and mortar and all that stuff. And I usually try to take a different approach to it. Growing up, my great grandfathers and my grandfathers were firefighters in the Baltimore City Fire Department. My brother-in-law was a police officer. So my family holiday parties have always been guns and hoses and all that fun stuff. And I guess I disappointed them all 25 years ago by becoming an architect and not continuing in the family tradition. But somehow I've managed in 25 years of practice to blend it all together, and still work with public safety officials and public safety entities all across the country. We're based north of Baltimore, but I've had the privilege and the opportunity of working with the city of Reading, Exeter Township, as far as northeast of Augusta, Maine, and all the way as far west as Ventura, California. So with that, we and our team have had the distinct privilege of working with first responders far and wide, doing a tremendous amount of research and development and understanding that the building is nothing without people. And so we heard Chief Jordan talk a little bit about some of the things that are important. And I think you may have glazed over things like cancer a little bit too quickly. A lot of times we see and hear first responders performing kind of heroic duties, or maybe sometimes they're just sitting around at the kitchen table, shooting the history of where things have been. But the public generally isn't aware that any given first responder is about 9% more likely to be diagnosed with cancer. And of those, if they are unfortunate enough to be diagnosed, have a 14 higher percent rate in mortality. That we know, back in the 60s when the second station was built in the 40s, the romanticism of a firefighter was how awesome your turnout gear smelled compared to a campfire. We now know that mentality is flawed and it has significant challenges with it, which is why we hear things like NFPA 1585, national standards to control these things. But the other factor that we often don't take into consideration that has become, fortunately, not so taboo to talk about is mental health and wellness. We consider our combat veterans when they come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. But most people don't realize that any given fire department is less likely to see something like happens on Chicago Fire or Rescue 911 in terms of an injury or a fatality. But any given fire department is about 4 times more likely to have a member amongst their ranks commit suicide. And we know that the bricks and mortar aren't going to fix that, but it can do a lot help mitigating some of those risks. One of the other things that Chief Jordan talked a lot about was, making sure that this is a facility for all. And what we need to recognize is that females in the first responder market sector, if you will, are increasing at about 4 to 5% per year. And a lot of times these outdated facilities that were designed by the good old boys back in the 40s and 60s aren't really accommodating for females joining the fire service or paramedics or EMS side. And so understanding those implications kind of play a large role in how we approach things. The other thing the general public, I think, in my experience, have often misunderstood is the value of the equipment that serves the community. By show of hands for the general public, and I know all you first responders know this because you have to spec out an engine. How many people think a ladder truck costs more or less than $250,000? Because by survey, the general public thinks they cost about $60,000 to $600,000. That's the average. When the reality is these pieces of equipment, an engine now will push you over $1 million. The ladder truck will push 1.5. So in addition to taking care of the people, the equipment that supports the community is also of tremendous value and needs to be protected. So as we kind of go through some of these slides here, and we'll jump into them, a lot of the design decisions and a lot of the programming and the needs assessment is rooted not in architecture. It's not rooted in this building hopefully making the cover of architectural record or anything along those lines. It's rooted in being a generational investment for the community that will support public safety for the next 50 plus years with appropriate and responsible maintenance. Nothing is firefighter proof, guys. We've tried it. In 25 years, we haven't designed the most resilient fire station that no firefighter can hurt. We're working towards it, but nonetheless, with appropriate maintenance, these facilities should last quite a while. I'm going the wrong way with the buckets. So as a quick overview of the building, you're going to see the plans that they've been posted in the back. We're looking at 7 full apparatus bays that would house the entire fleet of the township's emergency services vehicles. They're separate and dedicated areas for EMS service, especially since it's a contracted entity, but the shifts are a little bit different. how they structure themselves are different. We talk a little bit about sleep quality. So having kind of separate individualized areas for sleep ensures that the fire crews aren't alerted to EMS and they get that better quality of sleep when they can get their rest. That tying back into health and safety plays a large role in sleep deprivation, which then ties into long-term cardiac health issues, circadian rhythm, whole nine yards. And we can talk about that at the breakout sessions if that's a topic that you really want us to bore you with, but we can get into those meetings. Beyond that, there's training spaces. Chief Jordan mentioned that that's a sacrifice that they've had to make. That is one of the challenges that also ties into recruitment retention. The training requirements of the volunteer fire service are extremely rigorous compared to what they may have used to be. And as we all know, as parents and brothers and children ourselves, we're taking care of mom and dad now. We're working 3 jobs. The wife doesn't stay at home anymore. So we're stressed a lot thinner than we've ever used to be generationally. And so that training is tough to come by. And any opportunity we can leverage to seize that should take effect because that ultimately reduces staffing costs. Beyond that, we've got bunk rooms, personalized decontamination spaces, which is NFPA compliant. That talks about mitigating that risk to carcinogen exposure. And then we've got turnout gear that supports 102 lockers, which means the primary pieces that would need to be dispatched out of the station into the future would ensure that there's always enough sets of gear for the personnel that would need to be assigned to those particular units to provide what we'll call full court press or an emergency services situation. Beyond that, there's the administrative office space, a training room, and some social space for that gathering. We'll say social space, there's the kind of community multi-purpose room that is part of this that can be used for a myriad of events, and we'll talk through them. But there's also the camaraderie of what happens within the fire service. For those of you guys who are in the service, if we can get you into politics at the kitchen table where all of the world's problems are solved, that's what ends up happening in those environments. So a lot of mentorship and a lot of guidance happens within the kitchen environments and a little bit of the areas where some of that one-on-one mentorship can occur. And we can share some stories about that again at some of the breakout tables and why those spaces are so important. But then the general firefighter space, like report writing areas, we'll talk about decontamination around gear areas, the training facilities, the whole 9 yards in order to ensure that we have a fiscally responsible and sustainable department well into the future. So with that said, let's work. So this is just kind of an overview. We're looking at about 29,000, just shy of 30,000 square feet. The program consists of the 7 apparatus bays. On the right-hand side here, we have the EMS, Emergency Medical Services support area. We've got a training tower. We'll see some renderings for that would allow first responders to engage in web hose training, rappelling, laddering, forced entry, things along those lines, the basic skills. We're not necessarily talking live fire training in this particular environment, but a lot of the rudimentary skills that are necessary for firefighter 1 through firefighter 2 and 3 training, and some basic officer training and coordinating that to make sure that they're ready for service at any point in time. And that can be fiscally responsible in the sense that the units don't have to be trucked across town to an alternative training facility where the wear and tear is being placed on that apparatus. On the far side of the building, we've got some what we'll call flex bunk rooms that would allow for individual living quarters or even a live-in program that is widely popular in terms of getting college students to provide service to the volunteers for an exchange for a place to live. And that has benefit of serving the community in the sense that there is someone at the station in that model 24/7, 365. So to coordinate that, then you need kind of the common spaces, right? So we've got kitchen and day rooms, some fitness areas to ensure that we're fit for duty, general laundry where we're washing our clothes and our pillowcases and we're keeping those carcinogens that happen when we turn out here well outside of that environment. And then kind of some community area and training space that would be for public use as well as individual department training on the academic side, conference rooms of administrative offices, and then a turnout gear support. And one of the common threads that you'll see in this is it's not really a labyrinth the way that it's organized. The way the plan is organized to support that rapid response rate. We're trying to hit that 8-minute model, and depending on where the ISO rating comes into play, while there is a cost to the station, and depending if the ISO rating improves, you would potentially see a reduction in casualty insurance on homeowners and commercial property insurance as a result with reducing response times. So that's something to be considered, even though we're still early in the process, is that not everything is an expense. Sometimes there's a benefit that comes back on the other side. as we kind of move into the plan, we have, looked at the site plan and we can have HRG talk a little bit and circle back on the technicals of the stormwater management, sediment erosion control, and preliminary site submission. But fundamentally, what we're looking at is the station being placed at the center of the site, aprons that are large enough for the largest pieces of apparatus to be pulled fully out of the bay so that they can be serviced or the bays can be serviced without them obstructing traffic. We've got about 53 spot parking spaces scattered around the perimeter, and then a return loop that allows them to make kind of a continuous loop to drive through the site, mitigating the risk of backing into something, which is certainly, a lot easier for fire department operations compared to some of the existing stations and the restricted site conditions that they're currently facing. From an exterior perspective, we're trying to be cognizant of it's a civic building and it needs to kind of have a presence to itself, but also being conscious in terms of how we approach it. So right now, we're looking at what we would refer to in our line of work as a hybrid structure. So we're using a pre-engineered metal building for the structural frame in order to find a cost-effective way of clear spanning and erecting the building as rapidly and as resiliently as possible. But we also know through a lot of history that pre-engineered metal buildings and the screw-on wall panels with rubber washers don't last all that long. So it's hybrid in the sense that we're using some cavity wall masonry where we would have the apparatus bays and some of the more kind of abusive areas like the turnout gear, the decon areas, some fire department gear storage rooms would be protected by masonry walls, and the exterior being some brick cladding and things along those lines, so that we truly can create a facility that will stand the test of time and be resilient in the event of natural disasters. And we've seen plenty of those in our experience where, I think just last year up at Buffalo Station, a pre-engineered metal building that was under design collapsed under the snow load. Unfortunately, nobody was killed in that environment. But all of those things we take into serious consideration. And, Nate and Mike spent a tremendous amount of time working with Chief Jordan and the rest of the committee. We were kind of some of the visuals to pull along this, but trying to find something that has the volume and the space that is necessary, but is cost effective in the delivery. And that's just kind of an example of that training tower in the back corner where first responders can throw ladders and do some rappelling and some simulated smoke, search and rescue with water or oil-based smokes that allow simulated environments for some of those skills. So with that, I'm going to turn the rest, which has a lot to do with schedule and budget, over to Chris.
All right. Good evening, everyone. First, thank you for coming out for this. It's a very important project, and we're excited to be part of the team that's bringing it to you. My name is Chris Howler. I'm with Boyle Construction, and with me tonight is Sandy Zabo. I'm also with Boyle Construction, so we'll meet the two of us more so in the breakout sessions. But I just wanted to talk briefly about the schedule and then a quick overview of where we are with the budget. So with any new project, land development is the driving force that gets you through the schedule to the point where you can actually start doing construction. And to Exeter Township's credit, they are not looking to cut any corners because they are the approving agency. They are being completely transparent, and they are making themselves go through every step that you as a resident would have to go through, as well as if you were building a new building as well. So kudos to them for being transparent and making them do the same thing that you would have to do. So that overall process is about a year long. So that takes us out to about November the 26th. And while that's going on, and HRG is dealing with that with the different authorities, whether it's the municipality, Berks County Conservation District, DEP, while that's going on, the architectural team is really ramping up the design of the building. We have just completed the schematic design, which is really where we start figuring out what spaces are needed, sizes of those spaces, and how they go together. We have some preliminary ideas on how what the mechanical system, electrical and plumbing systems are going to be. None of those have been designed yet, because we really just needed to figure out what the building was going to look like as far as layout goes before we started digging in and designing those systems. So with all that happening, we're looking to complete the design phase in October 26th, and then the bidding phase for public bidding. From the time you advertise to the time where you actually receive bids and the board of supervisors would approve it. It's about a 3-month process. You need to advertise several weeks. You need to give the contractors ample time to put their bids together, review those numbers with the supervisors, and then ultimately award contracts to the lowest responsible prime bidder. We're looking at 5, maybe 6 prime bidders, civil, site construction, general, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and fire protection as 6 prime contracts. Again, we're looking to award the contracts in January 27. It really does set you up perfectly as far as timing goes, because November, December, January, even into February, as you can look outside today, it's not the optimal time to start digging holes. So we want to hit the ground running in February so contractors can start procuring materials, getting submittals and things like that, so that when the ground falls out, looking in, February, March, we get the ground running with being able to dig, and we're not dealing with frozen ground. That takes us out to about May of 28 to construct the building. About a month of closeout, punch this stuff, close out the contracts, close out permits and things like that, and let the township and the fire department move in. So the summer of 28 is what we'd be looking at as far as occupancy for the fire station. Now, looking at the budget, again, this is $2026, and this is at a schematic phase. So we have a building plan that will, do take us on. We kind of know what the walls are going to be constructed. That we can count the number of doors. But the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are still really, it's just a narrative of what systems are going to be. There's no design for those systems per se yet. So the budget estimate that was developed is a combination of takeoffs, building and site, and square foot costs for the building systems. So between the building and the site, we're estimating right now, again, this is schematic phase, so it's very early in the process, roughly $17.6 million for the contractual actual construction to get the building up. Now, along with that, there's some soft costs. Soft costs are everything from architect, engineer, construction manager fees, permits, the geotechnical that Bill referenced earlier. And then what they do is they go out and determine what the soils are on site, which helps develop what the structure for the building is going to be. It involves any vendors that the fire department or municipality works with. There may be a private vendor for developing the call system, for telephone systems, alerting systems, things like that. So everything that's outside of the actual construction project, but is also needed to occupy the building. The furniture is another one. Those are all items that are in soft costs. So between the building estimate and the soft cost estimate, we're right around $19.7 million. Now, on top of that, again, these are $2026. So we do have an inflation line item in there because inflation roughly runs between 4 to 6% per year. And some years it's been 10%. And there's some material items that have a higher inflation rate than what's normal. So we put a contingency in there on top of that so that the municipality can budget appropriately. The contingency isn't money spent, it's money planned. So we have a design contingency and a construction contingency. And those are for the things that we don't know yet. We don't know what the soil conditions are, so we don't know what the structural design of the footings are going to be. Some of that contingency carries into the construction. You may come across some unsuitable soils that just weren't known. So you have contingencies built in for things like that as well. So the 23.6 million number is the number that we're recommending the municipality plan for. We're not saying that's going to be the total cost of the project, but good planning to have that money set aside should you need it You're not scrambling to figure out where you're going to get. The goal is to not spend those contingencies. And the goal is that hopefully the politicians figure out inflation and it actually goes down, not up. With that, Bill.
So I have a dubious distinction of talking about how it will affect our taxpayers. So let's run down that. First of all, we have taken bonds out to pay mostly for this project. The bond term that we got is 25 years with an estimated interest rate of 3.84%. That will be charged for servicing the bonds. And the estimated annual debt service for two $10 million bonds, the one we secured this year, one we will secure next year, is about $1.4 million. So this, we're assuming for this part of the presentation that a full 20 million is funded through bonding, discounting any other monies that we would get, grants, donations, things like that. So if we get some of that, it will definitely reduce the millage impact for our citizens. And the final cost for our general obligation bonds that we're taking out does depend on market rates at the time of pricing and the structure of the bond. So in Exeter, one bill generates approximately 1.3 million in revenue township-wide. So what we will need is approximately 1.08 mils added to your tax burden. So the impact on the average taxpayer and the average assessed value of a home in Exeter is $116,000. That's not what the home is worth. It's the assessed value for tax purposes. There's definitely a distinction there. The cost for 1 mil is $115 per year. So to pay for the emergency services center for someone who has a home assessed at $115,000, it's approximately $124 per year, which equates to $10 or $11 per month. Okay, let that sink in a little bit. So here's some possible other revenue options. There's a program the state has known as RCAP, Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program, which takes matching funds, but we put in for that, last year and a half ago, and we were awarded $500,000. We asked for $5 million. We got 10%, right? But we're not done. We're going after more. The fire department in particular has done a great job of sending letters of support. Now let's see how many letters that you guys have. At 90, it's just amazing. From businesses, from homeowners, from some of our elected officials, state elected officials, some of which are not even covering our district, but still support this program, which is terrific. And that's, I think, going to count for something. So we're actually going after the additional $4.5 million to help pay for this project. We also put in from a local share account, and this is something set up statewide from horse racing proceeds, right? Gambling proceeds. And all the communities in Pennsylvania are eligible to put in for grants funded by those monies. And we did put in for a grant for $1 million for this project. Don't know whether we'll get awarded or not, but we're trying like heck to try to get enough support that our elected officials in Harrisburg will say, our governor will say, hey, it's a worthwhile project. Let's give them some money to make sure this comes to fruition without overburdening the taxpayer. Yeah, we couldn't finish for any more under that LSA grant. Yeah. Also, the fire department's looking for a low interest loan from the state, perhaps for a good amount of money, $612,000. And we're open to private donations. We've already got some, and that could be an important part of putting us over the top.